So how is everyone finding the pattern so far? Everything going smoothly for everybody? Wow, Julie, you are booking on that square.
Yeah,
Look
I'm
at
on
that.
I'm on A again.
Wow.
8
Wow.
ridges. So yeah, I love the lace pattern in D, in pattern, yarn
Yarn.
D. Yeah, I thought that was really fun. And I love the color, the way the colors are next to each other. And
Yeah,
I just,
the colors are really handsome. I love them.
yeah, and I just wound, I don't know which one's next, E maybe. I just
Oh.
wound that one. So if I get through my 8 or 9 ridge rows, garter rows, I can start on that. So yeah, I just love the yarn together. I just think it's so pretty.
And the weight is really nice. It's not too
Yeah.
heavy, but it's definitely going to be warm. And
Yeah. Yeah,
Well-
I've been tempted to put it on a couple of really long pearl strings to open it up and see, because I'm on my longest circular needle that I have, and I could switch to 2, but
you might want to, but then you're really far. So
yeah. It's still manageable. It's
Yeah.
not super tight on the needle, so. I think I have a 60-inch circular.
and then that gets to be like when the circular is too long, it gets to be a little unwieldy that it's so long,
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how many people have knit with color B so far? Everybody? No. Anybody? I should say anybody not.
Me, I haven't.
Oh, lots of
That's why
people
I'm
not.
starting row 2. So
Have you looked at it or squished it or?
Yes,
Oh,
I've
okay.
looked at it and I've wound it.
And it feels nice.
Yes, it
Yeah.
feels wonderful, but I must
Any-
admit, I really love the Jacobs.
Mhm.
You'll love every one of them, I swear. But yeah, the Jacob is really nice. And I'm really glad everyone loves it, because when I first felt it, I was like, oh, anyone who knit with our regular Jacob is gonna say it's scratchy or whatever, but it ended up being also one of my favorites. It's so springy and squishy when you knit it. So any guesses about yarn B?
Is it better breakfast?
Is it
No, no.
I thought I found some of that, you were calling it kelp,
Hemp.
hemp. Okay, in it, like there was some of that stiff, like third fiber. I thought I found some, but
That would
maybe-
be that would be a hard no with this yarn.
okay.
Unless
must have
it
been
just
from the other one.
unless it just fell in there from the mill, or it could have
Okay.
been it could have been grass. It could have been a vegetable fiber that you found.
Okay,
Anybody else? Anybody just shout it out if you think. Susan?
Kent, kind of Romney-like feel
That's
to
what
it.
I thought. It felt silky like that.
yeah.
It's
You-
not that.
It's
What
not
about
that.
like a churro or what's that?
Churro is the right pronunciation, but that's not what it is.
Okay.
Then
Oh,
my,
I'm so excited. I got you guys stumped.
my second guess would be the Perrindale.
Yeah.
No,
No,
this is a new one. This is for Bare Naked Wools, an undone fiber.
Oh, then I have no clue.
name that sheep.
Anybody? Come on.
BFL.
No, that's a really good guess, and you'll find out why when I talk about it. Anybody? It's Wensleydale.
I was just gonna say that. Is it the cheddar cheese one?
It's Wensleydale.
Wow, it's amazing, Wensleydale.
It really is. Yeah.
Because I've handled a lot of Wensleydale in England, and I'm just dumbfounded because
Well-
I haven't had Wensleydale that luxurious.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Really good. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice.
It's Wensleydale from New England. and as with, you know, as with other British breeds, I don't know what it is, if it's that they have maybe more woolen mills over there that are spinning those native breeds, but maybe maybe the semi-worsted process isn't as popular over there like it is here. I don't know, but many of the British breeds that we have spun are much, much nicer than the ones you see over there. And I've actually been, my opinion has been tainted at times in choosing fibers for our clubs and our barn box, because when I traveled in England and Scotland and felt so many different fibers, I became prejudiced against certain things, only to find out that when they're spun by a different miller, they can be different. And also I feel like our mills, the way our mills work with us is that they choose fiber for us. So they're super choosy. They know that we always, we don't dicker on the wool prices with the farmers, not because we have lavish amounts of money to spend, but because it's only fair that, you know, farmers aren't asking for a kingdom. They're asking for like barely covering their costs. So when they name a price, even when they think they're asking a lot, it's usually just really barely covering what they're doing. So we rarely try to make a better deal with a farmer. And so the mills are really proud to represent us to farmers and to cultivate wool flocks that are producing premium wool in at least part of the flock that they are saving for bare naked wools. And that's something we've cultivated over the 10 or 12 years that we've been making yarn. So part of the reason we get like the best Wensleydale or the best Cheviot or the best BFL, I mean, our BFL is like mohair is so beautiful. And if you feel it somewhere else, you may be unpleasantly surprised that it might not feel as nice. But we really have cultivated relationships to get the best that can be had where, you know, through the mills that we work with. So anyway, with that said, so we do get really nice fiber consistently, and our yarn is very reflective of that. So Wensleydale is a British breed of domestic sheep. It's named for the Wensleydale region of North Yorkshire, England. It is a very large long wool sheep, which is described by the British Meat and Livestock Commission as probably the heaviest of all our indigenous breeds. Rams typically weigh average over 300 pounds, and they have registered rams that weigh up to almost 450 pounds, which is like the size of a cow. You know, they're pretty big. And ewes typically range around 220 to 240, but again, can be larger. So the Wensleydale is a visually striking sheep with a considerable presence. It's one of those long rectangular shaped bodies like the Lincoln long wool, or even the Romneys aren't as rectangular, but Lincoln long wool is a really good example of one of those great big, with the big long chest and the level back, just a big rectangular sheep. It has it has a bold and alert, you know, way of standing. It has a broad back area with strong hindquarters and big thighs, and it has kind of long legs, but the legs are so thick with meat that they don't always look as long as they are. Whereas if you remember last week when we talked about the Jacob, they have kind of skinny legs. They look like puffballs on top of toothpicks when they're standing around because they're not that heavy kind of sheep. And the difference is partly due to the terrain that they traverse. Jacobs and the other primitive sheeps tend to be hill dwellers, and they need to get up and down those hills in a sprightly manner. And the great big Lincolns and Wensleydales are lowland sheep that basically just, mosey around eating all day. So the Wensleydale has a distinctive deep blue colored head. When I say blue, I mean like a gray blue. And that includes the skin. And someone asked about this last week or the week before, maybe when we were doing the Gotland, about whether the skin of the sheep is the same color as the fleece. And that's not always true, but with the Wensleydale, the head and legs are black or this dark blue gray, and the skin beneath is also dark. They have long locks of wool that are what they call pearled. It almost looks like when you ravel out yarn from a project, when you rip back and the yarn is all bumpy. That's actually got a name in terms of hair locks on a sheep, that's called pearled. So their locks are pearled like that all the way from the base to the tip. So the curl doesn't relax as it grows or anything like that. It's kind of bumpy all the way down. They have very large upright black ears and black legs, and both males and females are polled types, meaning that they're hornless. And another feature that they have is that they're and this is a human induced feature, but it has become a feature of the breed. They have a top lock, a forelock on their forehead that comes down between their ears and falls across the face. And that's a curly, long forelock that's left to grow when they're sheared. So they don't lose that at shearing. And that's called the topping. And while the topping is mostly aesthetic, it is said that the reason that growers started allowing that to grow was that so that when they took the sheep for judging, the quality of the wool could be judged easily by wool buyers and, at commercial docks and stuff like that. So I do have photos. Let me bring up a couple pictures. Okay. Where's my favorite?
Anne, is pearled like P-U-R-L or P-E-A-R-L?
Yeah, it's P-U-R-L. Okay. Here's a picture. These are a couple of Wensleydales in the pen at a show. So you can see what I mean about the locks, how they grow from 8 to 12 inches long in a season or a year. And they're all wiggly, like wiggly spaghetti or something, all the way down from the base to the tip. You can see that they have those black faces, and the faces are completely free of wool. These guys look like their forelocks have been trimmed back for the most part. I'm gonna find another picture here. Here's one with the forelocks showing. You can see how they fall right over their faces, kind of like that. The Warner Brothers cartoons, didn't they have a?
Yeah,
I guess it was a sheep dog though.
Yeah, it was a
it was a
sheepdog.
sheepdog, but that is what he looked like. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
he was a sheepdog that was supposed to be watching sheep, and his eyes were all covered with hair. And you can see here that and we'll get to more of this later, but the wool can be produced in white and dark colors. So that's that. Okay. So the Wensleydales, like many, like many of the long wool breeds, and they would be the blue-faced Leicester, the Leicester long wools, Cotswold, and even to some extent the Romney, although their locks don't grow all that long. Those breeds were all kind of developed to improve the offspring of the primitive hill breeds. So primitive hill breeds were very much desired for the quality of their fleeces and their ability to be kept easily on kind of large rural holdings, because they take care of themselves very well in the wild, but they don't produce a large carcass or a large fleece. And so many times our kind of middle modern breeds were produced by crossing some of the Leicester sheep with these hill sheep to produce something in between that produced more meat and higher quality wool and whiter wool, so that everything about the sheep was a little bit more commercially marketable. But Wensleydales were always noted for the quality of their fleece, and in addition to overbreeding, crossing rams onto hill type ewes, many of the Wensleydales were just raised always for with each other in a purebred strategy to produce the valuable luster fleece. It is the finest and most valuable luster long wool in the world, and consistently commands the highest prices at the British Wool Board marketing schedule, which is something that they do. In Great Britain, there's a national board for wool, and it sets certain standards, and it oversees the marketing of wool and the commercial trading of wool, and it provides assistance to heritage mills and heritage people who are raising heritage breeds. And it's kind of a give and take organization, kind of like the Silk Board of India is, or our USDA. They actually have one specifically for sheep and wool, and I'm sure they probably have it for other animals too, but or our interest is in the way that they help support the breeders of especially the native and the heritage wools of Great Britain. Wensleydales are not they're not the rarest breed, but they are on the United Kingdom's the Rare Breed Survival Trust. They're considered they're on a watch list by that trust. And in the United States, we have the Livestock Conservancy here that kind of tracks numbers of different breeds. And Wensleydales are not listed on our own conservancy site, but that could be because raising Wensleydales in the United States is fairly new. They've been here for about 30 years, which isn't all that long to develop large flocks. And so while the numbers in the US are very low, it's not because they are endangered here. Whereas in the UK, there at one time were more of them, and the value of them is so great in their kind of heritage of wolves, they want to keep at least a certain number kind of going. So they are on a watch list for the Rare Breed Survival Trust, but not the most rare fiber by any means. So the purpose of breeding Wensleydales in the first place was to provide, like I said, provide ramps for crossing onto hill ewes. And those include I don't know if you say Swaldale or Swaledale. Do you know, Catherine, by any chance? If it's what the
I believe
pronunciation of
it's Swaldale.
Swaldale, that's what I thought. The blackface, which are, kind of a mountain sheep, rough fell, Cheviot, Dalesbred, and Beulah, to produce more prolific, higher milking and hardy breeding ewes, like the original Masham would be an example. And also wethers. Wethers are castrated male sheep with a higher weight and more of a lean quality carcass. Wensleydale rams provide the extra size and quality to the offspring. And an example of an offshoot breed would be the Blue-Faced Leicester. So whoever said Blue-Faced Leicester earlier, while that isn't the wool that we're working with, it is an offshoot breed of the Wensleydale, of a Wensleydale cross. And to be honest, I guess it would be just Wensleydale back on top of one of the Leicester wools, and I'm not sure which one. There are many of those. Equally important, to the breeding and the ability to produce a larger, more adaptable sheep is the exceptionally high quality of wool, which make it an outstanding dual purpose sheep. The Wensleydale also shows some of the highest genetic resistance to scrapie, which is a parasitic skin skin infection that sheep get, and it causes a scurfy, kind of dandruffy situation in the fleece. And when you see it on a fleece, you have to basically discard it. So it is something that producers work really hard not to have, because it spreads easily. And when there's a saying in the sheep community, a sick sheep is a dead sheep. And even something like scrapie, which doesn't sound like it would kill a sheep, it can cause all of their fleece to fall out and to be damaged to the point where that will affect their health negatively. So something like scrapie, which seems small, can really affect the overall health of a sheep. And so Wensleydales have a high natural resistance to that. And so that's another reason for using them as both a sheep that you raise purebred or a sheep that you cross into a flock, because the resistance to scrapie is a genetic resistance. It's caused by a genetic marker that they carry and that they can and do pass on to their offspring. So it will always positively affect the offspring in that way. Let's see. Also, due to the unique characteristics of the wool producing follicles, the hair follicles in the skin of the Wensleydales, their fleeces are entirely chemp-free. They don't produce that fiber, even a little bit. So again, that special, unique and that's fairly or considered completely unique among sheep. It's one, if not the only breed that has exhibited this trait. And so that is another trait that is genetically transmitted through crossbreeding, and is one of the things that make the Wensleydale ram a leader in flock improvement. Apparently, well, not apparently, but as we talked about long ago with the Shetland breed, Kemp can be present in a high percentage in the fleeces of primitive sheep. So if you have a flock of hill sheep and you want to improve them, and you want to improve the fleece, that's one thing you want to kind of breed out of them if possible. So the Wensleydale is a good choice for that.
And I've
Yeah.
never heard the term Kemp before. Can you explain that a
okay.
little bit?
We talked about it when we did the Gotland segment a few weeks ago in Barn Box, but Kemp is so with sheep, you have many sheep are single coated and they have one type of fiber in their fleece, but many sheep, especially the primitive breeds, are double coated, and they have both a hair coat that sits on top and an undercoat that's softer and fluffier that's underneath. And the hair coat protects the undercoat, creating sort of a dual insulation system on the outside of their body. It's more water resistant, and it keeps the fluffy soft wool from getting soggy. And just like a down coat with a nylon shell works for us, it works similarly. Or like an umbrella works over your head, the hair coat kind of umbrellas the fleece and keeps it from getting very dirty or very wet, or even from parasites and things like that. And most sheep have either one or the other, but then there's a third fiber that can be found in sheep fleece. It's called Kemp, K-E-M-P, and it's kind of a straw-like, uncolored. It tends to always be this kind of light caramel color, like a dirty milky color, and it's kind of waxy and thick, and it grows in, usually there's a percentage that is present in any given fleece, and it doesn't behave like the other fibers. So pretty much when a fiber gets carded and spun, that will fall out, but once in a while you'll find some. It doesn't usually have any crimp or any luster or any of the things that make it especially spinnable. So it doesn't behave well in the spinning process.
Okay.
And so for the most part, it's just a heavy, coarse element in the fleece that you might not even notice it. But in our wools, you might find it once in a while because, of course, we don't do anything to our wool to dissolve and get rid of those things chemically. So, once in a while you might find something like that.
So the
It's-
Wensleydale doesn't have Kemp?
It's completely Kemp free
Got it. Okay.
through its genetics. But a fiber that has generally a higher percentage of Kemp would be Shetland is a good example of a fiber that does. And Jacob has only a small amount. The Gotland will have a little bit as well. I'm just trying to name some fibers that we have here. The Finn doesn't really have too much of it. It's just noteworthy if you find it. It's nothing bad. It's just, in general, not as desirable if you can get rid of it or minimize it in your flock. All right, so the Wensleydale long wool breed originated in North Yorkshire early in the 19th century, so early 1800s, when an outstanding Dishley Leicester lamb named Blue Cap was crossed with a now extinct local long wool breed from the region of River Tees. I'm sorry, my lips must be tired today. So a Dishley Leicester lamb just refers to the breeder, Dishley. He was actually this amazing very well-regarded breeder. They call him a master breeder of livestock in the area at the time. His tenure was from the mid 1700s to the early 1800s, and he produced many outstanding examples of the breeds of livestock that he worked with. So what's unique about the Wensleydale breed is that the breed association not only is able to identify a single foundation sire, but also can trace that ram's own parentage, his year and place of birth, and the breeder. So blue cap, that's very unusual among sheep, as anyone who has sat on barn box will tell you. It's really rare. It kind of reminds me of the legend about the start of the Gotland, modern Gotland breed, but of course that's a legend and not really documented, whereas this actually has a documented start. So Blue Cap was born in 1839 in the hamlet of East Appleton in North Yorkshire. His qualities, which determine the Wensleydale breed type without any further improvement with additional Leicester wool, were his dark skin, his superb quality of wool, and his size, which was 448 pounds as a 2-shear. So that's a great big sheep. And the term 2-shear, so they don't say like 2 years or whatever. They say 2-shear. And what that means is that when a lamb is born, from the period from the weaning off of the mother to the first shearing, the rams are called hoggets. And we've used that term before. So that's like the first hogget is the like lamb's wool of a ram. And then the first shearing, the rams are called shearlings. And from there, they take on the number of years that they have been clipped or shorn. So a 2-shear is 2 shears, 2 years, 3 shear, and so on, according to the years they are clipped. So this new breed, the Wensleydales, what was in existence actually almost 40 years before they actually gave it a name. They called it Wensleydales only because a name was required in order to enter it in a classed show, a classed sheep show in Yorkshire. As with the Teeswater, which is the female side of this line, the Tees, what did I say? It was the long wool breed from the region of the River Tees was called a Teeswater. The Wensleydale numbers declined as its role as a crossing sire diminished. So that's how it ended up on the watch list of the Rare Breed Survival Trust. As many sheep, you know, some of those wonderful heritage wools just weren't, well, let's face it, they're not merino, so they fall out of favor. So some of those long wool varieties fell out of favor fairly quickly after the war, when synthetic fibers became available to make things like carpets and upholstery and the fabrics that were used in technology. And wool was not desirable for those purposes anymore. Catherine, you have a question?
I sure do, about the shearings. Do the Wensleydales, like other breeds, get sheared every year, or because of their longer staple lengths, are they allowed to, you know, skip a spring and be sheared only a couple of times. So is the shearing a reflection of age, or is it really a function of staple length that they allow the
The,
coat to
the-
get longer?
yeah. I think that's two different questions. So calling them a two shear is related to the year that they're being sheared. So no matter how many times they're sheared in the second year, they would still be a two shear. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And then,
So the
uh,
two shear term has nothing to do with the frequency of shearing.
correct. And then because it said that it is, they are called two shear, three shear, and so on, according to the years they are clipped or shorn. So if a sheep has been clipped for 6 years, it would be a 6 shear.
Got it. But it could have been sheared 10 times in those 6 years.
Correct. And that's
Probably not, but yeah.
well, that's what I was going to say next. And then the second part of your question is, how often do they shear them? And the answer is, it depends on what your market is. So Wensleydale is highly desirable by hand spinners and crafters for weaving and processing by hand. And for that purpose, as long as long locks are desirable, people will save the locks, will save shearing and shear only longer ones. But for milling purposes, mills can only really process wool up to 6 inches or so. And so you're then talking about 2 shears a year if that's your goal.
Got it.
It just doesn't work in the machinery to have 12-inch long locks. So most people that grow sheep with long wool that can grow long will
Right.
actually are even willing to tailor their shearing schedule to the buyer's needs. Like, we've actually been offered to have mohair sheared 2 or 3 times a year, depending on what our mill prefers. So I would imagine if it was me and I was managing a flock like that, I would keep the very best 2 or 3 specimens and grow their fleece long to sell at the highest premium to hand spinners, because that's where you're going to get the most money there, but you're not going to have a huge market there. So maybe I would save, under 100 pounds, like maybe 50 pounds to sell that way. And then the rest of it I would share on a schedule that would allow it to be milled into knitting yarn or weaving yarn or whatever.
So could the quality of yarns, when you started, about the poorer quality of finished yarns of Wensleydales, at least that I've seen, would that be a function not only of the milling style, but perhaps the frequency of shearing?
Probably not. The
Okay.
quality of the fleece is twofold. It's
Yeah.
genetic, it's
Mhm.
genetic, and it's your care and feeding, and mainly feeding. So if you really are only grazing your sheep on poor forage, that's going to be reflected in the coat. And if you're supplementing the fleece a little bit, the food a little bit with some kind of feed, or you're bringing them to low lush pastures in the winter, or somehow supplementing the poor forage with good forage, you're going to get a better fleece. Also, whether you're trying to get wool from animals that are procreating at the same time is going to come into play as well. So the very best fleeces always are going to be from the castrated males. So usually the wethers produce the best fleece in your flock. And that's why people keep castrated males who are focusing on fleece. So if you're running a flock that doesn't focus on fleece, then castrated males go to market. But for producing really nice coats, they're the ones that you look to. And some farms will keep castrated males around for years that normally would have gone to the market as lambs because their fleece is so nice. And then the next best quality is going to be the regular rams, the stud rams. And after that, ewes that haven't had any babies yet, like a yearling ewes or slightly younger. And then most of the time ewes that are procreating have breakage and thinning in their coats that makes it undesirable. But those fleeces can still, they are shorn because that's sanitary for lambing. And that wool can be used for all kinds of other things that don't have anything to do with making yarn, you know, insulation and even carpeting and felt and all kinds of stuff that don't require a high quality fleece at all.
Okay, well, I have another question when you get to yarn and knitting things. I'll save it for that part.
Okay, Julie?
Is that what you were saying about the castrated males and then the rams, the quality? Is that true of all breeds or just this breed?
It's pretty common. It's pretty common. And when you think about it, it just makes total sense that, you know, any animal that doesn't have a job and just gets to stand around and eat all day is gonna produce nice, lustrous, you know, fluffy wool compared to the working animal, as long as it also has the right genetics. It's not just about that, but genetically, they need to be producing from parentage that hands along those good characteristics. Okay. So the breed has disseminated outside of Great Britain, and oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I think I have, yeah, I have this upside down. Sorry, I got confused on my notes here. Okay, breed characteristics. Like I said before, the Wensleydale is a very large sheep with mature rams weighing around and up to 300 pounds and ewes around 220. These are the standards of the British Breed Association that kind of describe the characteristics. The skin on the head and ears should be blue or blue-black, and that skin usually extends into the back and the flanks, and it's particularly dark where it's exposed to sunlight. And the reason I'm including that specific information is it came up in conversation before, and I didn't know the answer, but it came to me with this next breed, which was kind of cool. Ewes will produce 2 lambs and oftentimes 3 with minimal issues. So yearling ewes that are 1 year old, average 200% offspring, and mature ewes average 250%. So every other mature ewe is going to have triplets as opposed to twins. Twin lambs average about 13 pounds at birth, and the ram lambs reach 160 pounds in just 5 months. So they are fast growing and bred to put on bulk quickly. And they are ready to breed. Rams born in the spring are ready to breed hill ewes in the autumn. Let's see. The fleece in an unclipped sheep is very bright and lustrous, and the staple length the staple is a medium breadth and size all around the body. So no matter where you pull a lock from, it's going to be about the same length and the same density. Each staple is curled or purled throughout its length. And then the belly, legs, and scrotum and rams are also covered in wool and free of hair. Fleeces fleeces are 8 to 12 inches in staple length and 32 to 34 micron thickness, which puts it right in the medium range, but not as fine as, actually, it puts it in a little heavier medium range. So it's not as fine as the Gotland or the Jacob that we talked about last week. A yearling fleece will weigh somewhere between 13 and 20 pounds. And like I said before, entirely hemp free. I have to go get a water. I thought I had some out here. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Hey, while Ann's gone, Susan, how's your hubby doing?
Oh, he's doing better. Thanks, Donna. He's, the pain is getting less. He's not on the heavy pain meds.
Good, good.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you Saturday and you got off before I was able to do that. Well, that's good to hear. Okay, she's back. I'll shut up.
What
Does
kind of
that mean he's,
surgery did he have, Susan?
He had a full ankle replacement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
so he's not telling you how beautiful you are anymore since he's not on the heavy drugs?
Yeah. The first day was amazing. I was like a princess.
You just
So-
floated in and out of his consciousness. And
He's doing
Uh-huh.
better. Thank you. We're not still weight bearing. We haven't seen the doctor yet, but we're getting there. We're almost there. Thank you.
okay, so there are several breeders associations for the Wensleydale. In the UK, originally there were 2 separate breed societies that were formed in 1890. And the reason there are 2 was due to rivalry and conflicting interests, which often happens. So these were the Wensleydale Longwool Association and the Wensleydale Blueface Sheep Breeders Association, each producing its own flock book, despite the fact that they were associating over the exact same breed with the exact same characteristics. So they eventually recognized that this kind of division isn't really in the interest of the breed or the breeders. And that led to the merging of the 2 societies in 1920 to form what is the current and only British Wensleydale Longwool Sheep Breeders Association. So interestingly about the sheep and their fleeces, most of them are white, and as with many other animals, are bred mostly to be white because that is compatible with commercial textile industry. But some white animals carry a recessive black gene, and mating 2 sheep that have it can produce colored lambs from a flock that appears to be all white. So, all of a sudden you get a couple black twins in your white flock, and these came to be called black Wensleydales, even though the color can vary from silver to jet black. And the tips of the colored fleeces tend to weather to a golden brown or a beige. And I've been really remiss in not sharing photos, so I'm gonna do that right now and show you a few. So this is here's a picture of, this is a woman in Washington State who has a good sized flock of Wensleydales. she has a mixed flock that you can see all the different shades. There are many white ones, but then there's some with a pale gray. There's a few with dark fleece. And then she's got an alpaca because alpacas are herding animals. They work like sheepdogs do, to guard the herd. That actually isn't an alpaca, it's a llama, I believe. It has the long neck that a llama has. So that this picture kind of shows the range of different fleece colors that you can get. And then this next picture shows some close-ups of what it looks like when it's actually on the animal. Is it? Oh. So this is the white fleece, and you can see that the outer, on the outside of the fleece, it's dirtier and kind of reddish brown, but all the way inside, it's a bright white next to the skin. When you clean this fleece, all of it will be that very bright, lustrous white. And the purling of the locks is really evident in this photo as well. You can see that it is a crimp. It's not a spiral that's happening there, but it is that very bumpy, curly, very round bumps in the crimp. So that's the white fleece. And then the dark fleece on the animal. And this is, when they go for judging, these kind of pictures can be taken. And that's the dark fleece. You can see that all the way inside, it has a black or charcoal gray appearance, but on the outside, you get a lot of that bleaching out or golden brown from the sun and the weather. And that's kind of how our color, came about. It's got all of those shades mixed into it. And then I just want to show this is what they look like when they're sheared. Here's a freshly shorn Wensleydale. Look at that face. So cute. And already, even though they're shorn really close, look how curly the fleece is. And you can see how white it is when it's, and how shiny it is right next to the skin. So, so that's okay. Sheila?
On the first picture of that flock, there were blue marks on it, and I don't understand why anybody would color flocks with a pink color, or what is it? They were
When they bring them in to inoculate them and count them and kind of take stock of what they have, they mark them with different color. Actually, there were blue markings and orange, and it's probably just it can just be chalk or like a vegetable dye that
okay.
completely, that gets washed off. And even in the and any of it that stays usually gets completely washed off when the wool is processed. So they're just marking because they look, it's not like Jacob sheep where different patterns on different sheep enable you to distinguish them one from the other. These sheep all look the same. And so, if you've got a pretty good size flock, you want to make sure that they're that you're keeping track of who got what. And the other thing is, even when they go back out to the field, it does make it a little easier for a while to see which ones, to see if you didn't catch one that needs inoculation or whatever.
My
Okay.
uncle on his sheep farm would use chalk. He had special sort of belts. And he would use different colored chalk with different rams. And then the chalk would mark, he would know which ewes got knocked up by which rams.
Yeah.
And when the vet came to maybe do a sonogram, then it was marks like, oh, this one is pregnant, confirmed, this one has twins or whatever. So it's just
All different purposes. for that.
accounting. It's accounting, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Obviously, if you have like 5 sheep, you probably don't have to do all that. But when you're running a herd or a pretty big flock, and especially when you are breeding different kinds of sheep, you've got to keep track of all different stuff with them. And you see that with cattle and other livestock as well. Okay. So we were talking about the black Wensleydales, or I was talking about that, and how the color can vary. The lambs are generally born black or charcoal gray, and their dark fleeces tend to fade to a lighter gray or even a brownish gray with age and with the appearance of white fibers over time. So the variation in color within each staple is actually highly prized and valued by hand spinners and textile artists. So the colored wools do maintain their premium value. When the demand for wool was at its peak commercially, it was common for black Wensleydales to be culled from the flock to prevent the valuable white clip from becoming contaminated or polluted with dark genetics. But what eventually evolved, and also to protect the reputation of breeders. So that's kind of interesting, that your reputation might rest on something that could be accidental. But now a separate register is maintained this is all in the British Breed Association. They maintain a separate register in their flock book for colored Wensleydales, which occur naturally because of a double recessive black gene. These lambs are registered in the color register when they're born, and the parents must be then transferred from out of the white flock and into the color flock book, because clearly they're not producing, they're not capable of producing only white sheep. So colored lambs born in white flocks are actually very important because they widen the genetic pool for colored breeders, because the current genetic pool is relatively small compared to the breeders of white sheep. Since the color register was established in 1994, the number of black ewe lambs registered with the association has fluctuated. In 1999, there were 88 registrations from 13 flocks, but by 2009, the number of flocks had declined to 6. So in Great Britain, that is all, constantly on the move. Now, the information I was able to find about current numbers in these flock books is, I think, relatively old. It's at least 10 years old. And so with the resurgence of interest in British native wools, this could all be changing and on the upswing for colored sheep in Great Britain and for Wensleydales all around. Now, when a white animal has a black spot on it, they have a special kind of rule that they made about that too. So if a white animal has a black spot or a colored animal has a white spot, any registered animal at 1 year of age shall not have more than one spot within the main woolen area of the body, and that spot shall not exceed 2.5 centimeters or the size of a quarter. And it didn't say what they do with them if their coat breaks the rules. But what I'm assuming is that their assumption is that's not a real Wensleydale, and it has to be removed from both flock books in that case, since Wensleydales are not spotted sheep. That indicates some kind of contamination of another breed, of enough of another breed to make them not a purebred Wensleydale. Okay, so the North American Wensleydale Sheep Association is the breed registry which oversees the breeds standards and guidelines for and pedigrees of the North American Wensleydale sheep. Because this breed is in the process of being established here in the US, and because you cannot import live animals according to our own USDA regulations, our registry and breed up guidelines are very specific and have quite a few rules. And I don't know if you remember, but when we talked about this same situation with the Gotlands, with establishing the Gotland breed here in the US, it was very similar. They had very strict guidelines about what sheep can be used in crosses and what the percentages are to get to the purebred Gotland assignment. And it's the same thing with Wensleydales here. If you want to maintain the Wensleydale lines, you really kind of have to have you have to all agree on some rules and that you're going to follow them. So so having just like a bit of the Wensleydale genetics in some animal or other isn't going to qualify an animal for registration in the flock book. And the reason for that is so that when breeders get together to talk about breeding with each other's flocks to keep the genetic pool lively, they want to be sure that the other breeders have at least the same genetics that they do in their flock in terms of quantity. So our own North American registry was established in 1999, and they created the protocol for a breeding program here in the United States and throughout North America. The only way to have a Wensleydale breed here, since they can't import live animals, is to build it. And so at some future point, they hope to put together a history of the early period and recognize the breeders and shepherds that helped to create the breed here. But for now, it's just a growing kind of meetup of people with the same kind of passion for these animals. Like with the Gotland, they have specific guidelines for using blood percentages to breed up through 5 successive generations. It takes 5 generations to get to that 92% that is, kind of like the gold star of purebred, where you can say that an animal is purebred. Or by using, they're using imported frozen semen to do that, and also imported frozen embryos to on top of foundation sires. So each generation of offspring will give a percentage is given a percentage to track its blood when it's registered. And then this process is what takes the 5 generations to get to the point where you can say you have a full-bred animal. Let me just go back for 1 second. So in order to have kind of consistent product when it comes to the semen and the embryos. A woman here in the United States decided to create a company. It's called the Heritage Sheep Reproduction Company, or LLC. She works between US producers and UK breeders and producers to facilitate the shipment of frozen ram semen and frozen sheep embryos to the USA. So she kind of acts as like a broker between those two entities, and it benefits people here who because it enables you to have any size flock. You can have 2 sheep or 200, and you can get what you need through this company. So that's really great for farms that are producing unique breeds of sheep, and especially for farmers who are interested in having a variety of rare breeds in one place. So you can literally go on the website of the Heritage Sheep Reproduction LLC, and you can shop online for ram semen in any quantity. I think the minimum is like 5 straws or something like that. It's like such a little minimum, and the minimum, which makes the minimum order like $100 or something. And you can fulfill your minimum with a variety of breeds if you like as well. It's a super interesting way to shop. It's like the Amazon of sheep semen out there. She's got everything. I mean, she's got so many breeds, and it's just kind of interesting to go there and just look at how many breeds there are that you will never see in a book about sheep breeds, or, you know, that you've never heard of. And it made me kind of salivate over what the possibilities could be for Barn Box, if only we could, you know, or maybe what someday could be done. Anyway, it's very interesting. So so it's a really novel idea, and it really is very helpful to United States breeders, like I said, but especially those raising unique breeds. And she has importation permits to bring in as many as 7,000. They call them straws of ram semen each year from over 30 breeds in the United Kingdom. And they are all stored at a facility in the Great Lakes called the Great Lakes Sire Service. I love this, in Michigan. And they're stored under liquid nitrogen, and then the frozen sheep embryos are stored at Reproduction Specialty Group in Lebanon, Indiana. So she's got it all set up. It's just awesome. Now, let's see. So that's how we're getting started here in the United States with Wensleydales, through passionate breeders and the help of brokers like Deb Nelson Gorley. You know, people are making it happen here. The mission on the US side was to totally recreate the UK Wensleydale breed here in the US, which is a little different than what we talked about with the Gotland breed. And I'm sorry for those who weren't here for that Barn Box. I keep referring to this because the similarities to me are really evident, and yet the differences are also interesting. So with the Gotland breed, they also had to build from the ground up, but their goals were slightly different. They wanted to combine some genetic purposes in the US breed to create a modern Gotland sheep that bridged kind of this bipolar this bifurcation of the European, of the British, I'm sorry, of the Swedish Gotland breed into kind of a soft wool versus a highly lustrous wool. And in the US, Gotland breeders are trying to kind of bring all of the good characteristics together. Whereas with Wensleydales, the main goal at this point is to completely recreate the a Wensleydale sheep that is just like the Wensleydales in the UK. And it remains to be seen if that's going to be the final result. It could take another 10 or 15 years to see if the climate and we have a really big country with a wide array of climate and terrain that Great Britain doesn't necessarily have. And our ability to feed the same sheep in the same way all the way across the country isn't necessarily even possible. So it'll be interesting to see how a brand new breed here, built up from the ground here, how it will play out in the decades to come, if they will meet the goal of recreating a UK breed, or if they will end up recreating something different, as happened with the Gotlands that went to New Zealand. When producers in New Zealand brought Gotland genetics and Gotland frozen embryos to New Zealand, the goal was to recreate the Swedish Gotland sheep. But probably because of the terrain and the climate and the type of forage, they ended up producing a Gotland sheep with slightly different wool characteristics, and different enough that the Swedish and British Gotland people or breeders don't want those genetics mixing with theirs. They want that to be a separate type of Gotland because it's just different. So that could happen here with Wensleydales as well. But for now, we're just working to keep consistent with the UK. I imagine if that continues to be the goal, then what will happen is that the breeders will ultimately figure out what climatic conditions suit this sheep best, and it will be raised mainly in those parts of the country that can provide those conditions. Because what will happen is that fleeces of animals grown in other conditions that vary too much from the norm won't be sellable. And so they won't, people in parts of the country that can't support the UK type will be discouraged from doing that. They may branch off and create something different, but it wouldn't be a Wensleydale that conforms with the association guidelines. Okay, so in order to recreate Wensleydales here in the US, what has to be done is the genetic material is brought in, the ram semen is brought in and bred onto foundation ewes of a totally different breed. So we did talk about this also with the Gotlands, so what a farmer does is registers a foundation flock. It has to be a flock of sheep that is they have a very strict kind of guideline as to what type of sheep it can be. I'll get to that in a second. So they have a foundation flock that's a non-Wensleydale flock, and they inseminate them with this Wensleydale semen. And the first generation is going to be like 50-50 Wensleydale and foundation flock genetics. And then they're going to take those sheep and breed them with each other to make a 75-25 mix, and so on until they get to a 92% at which point it would be considered a full-blooded Wensleydale. And the foundation flock ewes are really important because they're going to ensure that the breed standards are maintained as much as possible. So for instance, a Merino would not be in the foundation flock. A Merino ewe would not be there because the wool is entirely different. The body type is entirely different. The type of feeding is entirely different. And the genetics are going to transmit to the offspring. The breeds that can be used in the US for a foundation flock are the Cotswold, and they have to be registered. The breeds of the sheep of the foundation flock must be registered with the associations of that breed. So even that is limited. So foundation flock members can be Cotswolds that are recognized by three specific Cotswold associations. They can be Leicester Longwools, also recognized by the Leicester Longwool Sheep Breeders Association, or they can be Lincoln ewes, recognized by the National Lincoln Sheep Breeders Association. And on top of that, the use of Leicester Longwools for a foundation flock is actually discouraged by the Wensleydale Association because the population of Leicester wool is so low in the United States that the gene pool is small and considered, too small to be really a healthy foundation ewe, if that makes sense. So really the best sheep to cross with are the Cotswolds and the Lincolns. And even those are all of those sheep, all of those foundation breeds belong to minor sheep breeds in the US, meaning that they are sheep that are on some kind of watch list or rare breed list or endangered list even, because they're just not common here. So once approved, the foundation ewe can be used to start new lines of registered Wensleydales, provided she is bred with the frozen semen from an approved UK ram. So it's all very kind of complicated. You have to fill out a lot of paperwork, but if you really want Wensleydales, you got to go through all this to go through it. And the approved ewes must have a 0% Wensleydale blood percentage. So that actually has to be proven as well. So that's sort of like a lot of stuff you have to go through to get there. Now, we talked about the physical characteristics of the sheep, of the Wensleydale sheep earlier, so I'm not going to go back over those, but the wool characteristic, and we talked about the wool characteristics interspersed with that, but I guess the only thing I have to add to that is that the wool is used for hand knitting yarn and weaving yarn. It is used in knitwear and clothing, textiles, and some upholstery fabrics. Obviously, being such a small production fleece in terms of flock numbers, it's just not a commercial, and it's expensive. It's not really got a high, it's not a big commercial product. It really is mostly used by people who do handcrafting. And often it is blended with mohair because they're so compatible. The mohair locks and the Wensleydale locks are really similar looking, and they're similar lengths and luster, and they just combine really beautifully. Catherine, did you have a question?
I did. So I'm wondering about the weight. Obviously, we have a sport weight yarn in the mystery bags, but I was wondering if the longer sheared locks that are saved for hand spinners, are those typically used for lace knitting because of the longer staple? I mean, would I be able to find like a fabulous Wensleydale lace yarn? But they can't mill it at that longer staple length, I guess, is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, right. So if it's commercially produced, it's likely from a fleece that's sheared multiple times. The other thing about shearing multiple times per year is that you get a little bit more consistent color. So as you saw in the photos, when you let the locks grow to 12 inches, there's going to be a lot of variation within the lock itself. Shorter locks are going to be more consistent from base to tip because they just don't spend as much time out in the weather. And let me just see if I have, and I'll get back to, I'll get back to finishing your question in a second.
Yep.
Let me just see if I can find, if I have a picture of a kind of mid-length fleece in here. I think the ones I showed you, this one with the woman with the larger flock, her sheep are showing kind of a mid-length. I would say these locks are probably in the 5 to 6 inch range, maybe as short as 4.5 inches, but they're pretty long, but they're definitely not hanging down to their knees or anything like that. And then another one is let's see. I think this guy might have a kind of mid-length fleece. Let me just see. Not really. That's the head, close up of the face and head of a sheep that hasn't been shorn yet. So yeah, no, I don't have any more mid-length appearance. So if you wanted a lace weight spun from a 12-inch locks, you would have to spin it yourself, or any weight yarn. And I think I mentioned before that when I first started spinning, I bought some Wensleydale fleece at Rhinebeck. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea. It was going to be 12 inches long. I just went home and spun it and enjoyed it. And I think my yarn was probably like a heavy fingering weight. It was like spinning Rapunzel's hair. It was so beautiful. It was just the most beautiful fleece. And now, looking back on it, I'm like, I totally wasted that because it was obviously like a premium hank of fleece that I just didn't realize how easy it was going to be to spin. And if I had the expertise, I would have spun it as like a lace weight. But I have bought fleece from that same farm since, but not gotten that particular quality again. It just was the luck of the draw what I chose. So I hope that answers your question. It doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't matter quality wise in the yarn if the fleece is 12 inches long or 6 inches long in terms of like the strength of the yarn itself. Because for one thing, one has to be a hand spun product and the other can be a machine spun product if you want to. But the shorter fiber might produce more fuzziness a little more halo because there will be just by necessity more ends poking out. What some people do with the really long fibers, and I actually have a rug made this way. The weaver spun the long wool with the tips kind of flying out freely from the yarn, and then wove them into a rug. So it has kind of like that flocati texture to it, like a shaggy flocati. Even though it's not Wensleydale, it's another kind of long wool, but the idea is the same, where with hand spinning, you have the freedom to use the lock in a variety of different ways. Julie?
Did you talk about their temperament at all?
I didn't really see a lot of, I saw nothing actually to describe the temperament like we sometimes see with other sheep. And that's just the nature of kind of doing this research, is that the best compilation of information is often from the Breeders' Association itself. And then everyone else basically copies it. So you can look at 10 different resources about Wensleydale sheep and they'll all say really similar things because they're all coming from, the same place.
Yeah,
And
Wonder,
if
'cause
that,
we talked about the Jacob having such a good
right,
temperament being.
right. And if that original source wasn't interested in whether the sheep are friendly or not, then it's not going to be in there. But that said, they are huge sheep. So they're kind of lumbering big sheep. Generally, really large sheep are not that easy for like anyone in a family to handle. So usually the man or someone large is going to be the one handling those sheep, and you're not going to let the kids or the family members, smaller family members, kind of be around that size of an animal without supervision. So it might be even hard to tell if they're actually friendly or not. But being and the other side of that is because they're used to improve other sheep that are more hill sheep types that are out kind of far and wide on a large farm. They're not going to be hanging around the house. They're just not going to be in proximity to the household where you would take note of those kind of characteristics. That would be my guess as to why it's not mentioned. Marge, did you have a question? I guess not. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions about the actual breed or the wool they produce, anything like that? Anything I haven't covered that you want to know? Now I just want to talk about one other thing related to Wensleydales, and then we'll move on to talking about the yarn itself. And because this also came up in a previous discussion, I think it was last week, Lindy asked about cheese, and there is Wensleydale cheese. It has absolutely nothing to do with these Wensleydale sheep. So Wensleydale cheese, also, it's a medium cheese that's kind of supple and crumbly with a kind of, it's described as having a slight honey aroma and flavor, well suited to combination with fruit. It was first made by French Cistercian monks from the Roquefort region that settled in Wensleydale during the 1200s and 1300s. And as you know already, the Wensleydale sheep breed didn't come into existence until the 1800s, so not related. But as it happens though, Wensleydale cheese was originally made with sheep's milk. These French monks built a monastery in North Yorkshire, and then later moved to Gervaux in Lower Wensleydale. They brought from France a recipe for making cheese from sheep's milk. And at that time, that cheese was called the Wensleydale cheese, and it was almost always blue cheese because the sheep's milk provides in the cheese a more open texture that allows the mold to grow in the kind of crevices that form as it dries. So but during the 14th century, being in Wensleydale, which is also highly populated by cows, they began using cow's milk instead, and the character of the cheese began to change. They still used a little used milk mixed in to provide the texture needed for the blue mold to form. But that type of cheese eventually kind of declined in popularity. And today the opposite is true, where the blue Wensleydale is more rare now, and the white Wensleydale is more common. The monastery itself was dissolved in 1540, but local farmers continued making the cheese until the Second World War, when most of the milk from Great Britain was diverted for making government cheddar, which I love. Even after rationing ceased in the 50s, the cheese making never did return to the pre-war levels that it had enjoyed. Although, again, I'm sure in recent years, a lot of that is changing, since Great Britain is investing quite a bit into reviving its heritage, its agricultural heritage on all levels, from food to wool to meats, and all kinds of agricultural products are enjoying kind of a renaissance, I guess. The first creamery to produce Wensleydale commercially was established in 1897 in the town of Hawes. It was called Wensleydale Dairy Products. It was called the Wensleydale Creamery. I'm sorry, it was called Wensleydale Dairy Products, and they bought the creamery in 1992 and sought to protect the Yorkshire Wensleydale name under the European Union regulations that protect, that give like a geographical indication marking or status. And this was awarded in 2013. So the term Yorkshire Wensleydale can only be used for cheese that is made in Wensleydale, but not from Wensleydale sheep, which aren't really used to make the cheese anymore. By the 1990s, sales of this cheese had fallen so low that production in the area was at risk of being suspended. And then the cheese experienced a boost in popularity after being featured in several Wallace and Gromit clay animated shorts. I know. That's why I'm telling the story, because it's got such a great ending. So Wallace, who is a cheese connoisseur and inventor, mentions Wensleydale as a particular favorite cheese. The animator and creator, his name is Nick Park, chose the cheese solely because it had a good name that would be interesting to lip sync in claymation, rather than due to its origins in Northern England, or to help, anything to help the company in any way. He was completely unaware of the financial issues and difficulties that the company was experiencing, but was happy to have helped out. The creamery contacted the animation company about licensing a special brand of Wensleydale cheese called Wallace and Gromit Wensleydale. And the cheese sold so well that in 2005, when the full-length Wallace and Gromit film, The Curse of the Were Rabbit, was released, sales of Wensleydale cheeses increased by 23%. So I'm just telling this story because it's such a good example of how these little niche products can pick up like steam and become a thing, and how compatibility between types of companies and types of products can actually be like a win-win, situation. Like us with our wools, Bare Naked Wool's buying specifically from certain producers because they breed the sheep we're interested in and they breed the quality that we need. And then a mill that listens to what we want in terms of the kind of yarn we want is a win-win-win for all three entities. And actually a fourth entity, which is the consumer, which is you guys. You not only get like great yarn that handles really well and beautifully, but experiencing this wool in your hands at all is, something unique and not necessarily available on an everyday basis, just anywhere for you. Lindy, you have a question.
Yeah, I do. Do we know what's happening with these denominated geographical things now that the Britain is out of the EU? Is that going to stay the only place that can make this Wensleydale cheese?
I don't know, but there's a really good resource for that called the internet. You can Google it. And yeah, I didn't want to go too far afield. And it did occur to me, like, what's happening with that now that they're not in the EU anymore?
Yeah.
But hopefully they're just establishing a lot of their own. I mean, sheep and cattle breeders have been establishing their own associations and rules and markings for years. Food and other agricultural products can follow suit. And Catherine might know, since she's often aware of what's happening in the financial world.
Well, I was just going to say that one of now King Charles's pet projects for several years now has been the protection of heritage cheese, not only in the UK, but in Europe. He's looked at the EU sort of bureaucratic rules on cheese making as destroying, centuries of European culture. And he
No pun intended.
yeah, and it's been really a personal project for him. And with Britain out of the EU, and now that he's a king, I think you're probably going to see more of that kind of thing. And he also, because of his environmental interests, has been really trying to promote protection and elevate the British Wool Board and try and elevate the various British breeds. So my guess is now that he's king, we could see a lot of improvements in both areas. He went to Shetland, I want to say a couple of years before the lockdown, and he had never done that before. And he went there specifically to promote the wool industry and, met with a lot of the designers and things. So he really, it's something for him as an environmentalist and as a, important representative of the country. It's a deep personal interest for him. So it's kind of exciting for us to sort of watch, because, we may see a lot more of it. We may not. I mean, the problem with the EU is they're getting rid of like farming, like in places like Holland. So the US could become a sort of lifeboat for a lot of these breeds, and the UK as well. So in some instances, this is where the separation is a good thing. Not in all instances, obviously. And but this is going to be fascinating to watch, right? Because he's newly crowned, and we'll see what happens, how long
And,
he's
and,
on the
and
throne.
along, and along those lines, I mean, like I said before, the US has this just incredible variety of terrain and climate and feeding conditions to support breeds from all kinds of places, you know, from Southern Europe, Northern Europe, East and West, even parts of Africa. We've got climate conditions that will, you know, support all of it.
One of
So
the really exciting things about the United States is we are becoming the gold medal winners in cheese making around the world, because we make cheese with raw milk, and that's illegal in Europe. So we're taking the techniques from Europe and building creameries here in sheep and in cow, different types of dairies, so, and goat. So it's a really exciting time in the United States. So I encourage everybody to get out there and investigate cheeses that are maybe grown in their state, or go to a good market and look for American cheeses, because we're able to do things that they can't do in Europe anymore. And so we're becoming a sort of a life raft for a lot of old tradition and food. So it's kind of exciting. And that may be what's going on with the Wensleydale, where they're seeing it declining in Europe, and some people are stepping up, and I don't know, but it's fascinating.
yeah, I mean, it's not a dairy.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a dairy sheep, per se.
No, I know.
but-
I'm just saying in general, the two,
Yeah.
they're correlated.
Yeah, but the same is happening with wolves across the board as well. I mean, there are more and more and more people raising a few or more specialty wolves on their farms, just because they love it. You know, they love having a variety. Anna, you have a question.
Just a really random comment. The best thing about Wallace and Gromit coming in is that you know that Gromit is a knitter, the dog.
Yes. I know. It's just a really cool little story I came across, and I really like it. And oh, I actually have pictures, not of Wallace and Gromit, but of so this is sort of like the modern Wensleydale cheese. That's what it looks like. And I have to admit, like, I worked in a cheese shop when I was young. I worked in a cheese shop that offered several hundred varieties of cheese, and I loved it. I love tasting all of them, and I cannot remember what Wensleydale tastes like right now. I was trying to remember, but I'm sure at some point I'll be reintroduced to it. And then this is somebody's got audio going on in the background. If they could shut it, that'd be nice. Okay, and then this is the creamery. And they don't I'm sorry, it's coming up. The creamery doesn't just produce cheese or cheese products. It produces butter and all kinds of other dairy products as well. But these are some of the antique equipment that they have in their little, I guess they have like a little on-site museum or whatever. But you can visit there and buy yourself some genuine Wensleydale cheese. Anyway, anybody have any questions? All right, so yeah, we made this, this is, I'm just gonna say this, it's not fair or anything to any of the other yarns, but this was probably my favorite yarn of the 5 to knit with. I really, and I think mainly because I was surprised at how lovely it really is. It's very voluptuous yarn to knit with. It's just literally butter in your hands. I don't know if the others who have knit with it already agree or not, but that was, for me, this was my favorite of the lot. And we left it up to the mill to decide what the construction would be, but I'm glad that it's a 2-ply. I think that that contributes to the springiness of this otherwise what would be kind of a heavy silky fiber. The 2-ply construction gives it the most buoyancy that it's going to have. If you wanted a really smooth Wensleydale, you could spin a multiply sport, but I didn't want to get that silky because it would be paired with other fibers that would be, might feel incompatible if we went with a heavier, silkier kind of construction. Any questions about that, or anybody have feedback themselves on knitting with it? Julie? You're the one who's furthest along.
I liked it. It's, it's just 4 rows. So
Oh,
to me,
yeah.
it's a little hard to get a sense of like a big swatch of it. But I liked it. I liked the texture. I just love the blending of the color with the first yarn.
Yeah, and when you at first it doesn't seem like there's going to be much contrast between that and the Jacob, but then I mean obviously when she holds up her knitting you see
Yeah,
that
you can see it. You can really see
it's
it.
like the perfect amount. You don't want anything that's going to jump off the shawl,
It's right there. Yeah,
That'll-
outside I can
that'll
really
come
see
later.
it.
That'll
Yeah.
come later, hint, hint. Yeah. But it is really subtle. It's very handsome and kind of, for me, always gives me insights as to, oh, yet another color combination that we can do with a mannequin, kind of thing. Catherine?
Any idea when David's gonna list the skeins?
Okay, so the Jacob went up this week. It's being listed now. And we will list the skeins one at a time as we reveal them. Cause some people don't want to know what it is some people don't want to know what their skeins are until they come to them. So, as each Wool School session happens, we'll release the skeins. And we'll only tell you guys about it in the emails. We won't be like putting it in our newsletter or putting it on social until the end. So they will be available mainly to you guys. We can't keep someone else from stumbling upon it and being like, whoa, Wensleydale. But largely people that doesn't happen unless we tell people about it. So the Jacob is up now or it will be tonight, and the Wensleydale will come next. And our next Wool School for the next yarn is not this Saturday, but next Wednesday, I think. I think that's right. Okay, Susan?
What do you think about the interlocking made in the Wensleydale?
Oh, that would be so gorgeous.
The minute I picked it up, I thought of that pattern.
You mean the skirt?
Either the sweater or the skirt.
Yeah, I think either would be nice. The skirt would be amazeballs because the drape and the luster and the durability would be fantastic. And I think, it's a very sturdy wool, but it doesn't feel stiff or anything like that. It's going to have really nice drape as a skirt. And of course, it'll go with any other, it'll go with the interlocking you already have.
Right.
That color will pick up with all kinds of other colors.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you say you were going to do a Zoom chat about HAPS?
Yep.
Is that
Saturday.
Saturday? Okay.
Yep.
Couldn't remember.
Yep. Catherine, do you have another question?
Nope, sorry,
Okay.
let me drop my
Okay.
hand.
Lucy, what was your question?
My question is that I am super nervous here. I have 12, I've finished 12 rows and I've just started on the second ball of yarn. And I thought I heard somebody saying last week that they finished all 37 rounds on the first thing and had yarn left over. So I guess I'm sort of panicked, but I can always get more, right? But
Can you
does
hold-
that
can
seem
you
right
hold
to you?
Oh, that doesn't look right.
That's what I was
So-
afraid of.
Lucy, it's supposed to be knit and garter stitch. So you should be,
Have two
I know
rows,
she did.
four
Instead
rows
of
of-
4 sides, she did 4 rows before the purl. Instead of the
Yes.
4 sides of the square.
I have 4 rows of purl and then, or knit, and then 4 rows of purl.
but you're supposed to only have one row of knit and 1 row of purl.
Oh,
It's a 2-row pattern
okay.
and you're
I have
supposed
to
to
read
read,
this again. Well, that's frustrating.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'd rather, frankly,
And
I'd
when,
rather,
and when it says 4 times, that's 4 times around your square.
oh, okay. I
So
misread it.
each square has 4 sides and you'll be working the stitches inside parentheses 4 times per row.
Okay. So each one, it's 1 row of knit and 1 row of purl, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Do
Our-
we use this yarn
Our-
again?
Yeah, it'll be
Okay.
fine. And what you might want to do is start over again with your new ball and wind that ball up so it has a chance to just sit, and straighten out. That'll
Okay.
straighten it out.
Okay.
And our deepest condolences, Lucy.
Well, it won't be the first time I've frogged. And that's really why I hung out in here to ask, because I thought something's really wrong here, I think, because. Oh, well.
I mean, you could just, if you have the right number of rows, you could
Yeah.
just redesign the inner
Yeah,
square.
nah,
Yeah.
I
Lucy,
get-
could you put it up again?
Yeah,
It's,
see.
Yeah,
Four
okay,
rows of
I get it.
equal.
Yeah.
so if
Started
you,
doing that too, Lucy.
Pardon me?
I
If
started doing that too, sorry.
Lucy,
you-
just think of it as a mishap.
Well, I never. Oh,
you can keep it and call it your mishap.
yeah. I
It'll be
never
fun.
get extraordinarily distressed about frogging because I want it to be right, My
Uh-huh.
husband always says, "Oh, that's so awful." He just thinks it's terrible when I have to frog, but.
But you
not-
really could keep it if you wanted it. It's still going to be a square and it's still going to be the right number of rows. So,
Yeah, but it's not gonna be, it's gonna be way too much, too big. If I,
no,
it's-
you would still only work to the right number of stitches. You would
but
still
it's-
only,
Won't it be too long? I have 4 and 4 instead of one. And
I'm not talking about rows. I'm talking about the number of stitches. You could do your pattern until you have 75 stitches between the corners.
Okay, well, then I'll be completely out of yarn.
No, you won't. You just won't have as many ridges. You'll have like a quarter as many ridges, like 10 instead of 39 or whatever it's supposed to be.
For whatever reason, that's not how it's working out. So I'll just deal.
All right.
Okay.
Marcia?
Yeah, I have a gauge question.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I have 2 gauge questions. The first
Okay.
one is, I did knit gauge swatches for the Jacob, and I found interestingly that I normally have to go up a needle size from what the patterns call for.
Uh-huh.
And with the Jacob, I actually had to go down 2 needle sizes
Wow.
to get gauge, which I
Mhm.
found very odd. But since the gauge swatch was in stockinette and we're knitting in garter, I don't know how to check, and I'm on row 52 of the first pattern. And I don't know how to check, and I'm concerned whether it's going to be too small because it somehow knitting the main shawl is different than knitting the swatch, which does happen to me. Or not.
Well, first of all, when you knit your swatch, somebody has a TV on or a radio.
It's Marge Palick.
Oh,
Because
okay.
her picture keeps coming up, and I sent her a private email, but she hasn't shut off her audio.
Marge, could you mute your sound?
I'll try.
Oh, you were right. That was her. Okay.
Okay. I have it set on speaker view. So every time her sound cuts in, her picture would come up.
Oh, you know, that's how
I
you
can
know.
tell.
Okay. I have the group up here.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, when you knit your swatch, did you wash your
Yes.
swatch?
Oh,
and dry
yes.
it? Okay. Just making sure. I have to
Oh,
ask.
no.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, the fabric is good.
yeah. Yeah. And as long as you got the right gauge in your stockinette gauge, you should be fine in terms of all the other stitch patterns that you're going to be doing. When I did the pattern, I knit my whole shawl and then I did my stockinette gauge with the same needles. So that the theory is if you can match the gauge that I got on my stockinette, you should be getting the same gauge I got on the different patterns. The different patterns have different gauges. So, but you're making a triangle or a square. It's
Right.
all geometric and you're going to block it and further manipulate the fabric. So I'm highly confident that everybody should end up with a very pleasing piece. But if you feel like, as you're knitting it, if you feel like it's too heavy or dense,
No, it
you
doesn't seem to be.
okay, then I think
And my other question related to the fact that we're knitting with 5 different wools, which are obviously different
mhm.
and different density. And if you were knitting a garment or something out of each of them individually, you would do individual gauge swatches,
Correct.
and the gauges might be different.
Mhm.
I assume that because A, they're different stitch patterns, and B, it's just a triangle, it doesn't much matter.
It doesn't much matter. They're all spun to the same yardage per ounce. So within reason, I think we just counted we counted the yardage in at all the skeins today just to be sure, and they only vary about 10 yards between them. Like they're all at least 175 yards, and some of them have as many as 186 or 188 yards. So they're very, very similar in terms of the length. And you're right that in some of the fibers, there's more density and heaviness. And that just, what I did as the designer was to use the yarns in a way that's compatible with their character within the design. So hopefully that translates. You can even mix them up. You don't have to even do them in the same order I use them. They're all going to be really similar to each other, even though some of them are 3-ply and some of them are 2-ply and some of them are long wools and others are medium wools. They're all going to be slightly different, but you are correct that we're not talking about a garment that's very fitted, and B, we're talking about a triangle where you're dispersing each yarn out, in a band and mixing them up from top to bottom. You'll use each yarn most of the yarns you're going to use twice. I think there's only one that you'll only use once. So, you know, I'm pretty confident you're going to like it. I was very happy with the result that I got. And, you know, I was making it up from scratch and I really didn't know what it was going to be like. So I was very happy. And I think based on the feedback of satisfaction on last year's project, I think people will be equally satisfied with this year's product, if not more.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I figure if I mean, I know that some people mentioned that they have like 25 grams left after finishing the section A section. And if I discover that I have significantly less than that, I'll buy another skein.
I think, and I think those people are making the square.
Oh,
So that means that they've used 3/4 of yarn A, which if you are making the triangle, that would be not 25 grams left over, but like 12.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I'm not gonna worry. I was just curious because
Yeah, and what we
we pay so
find,
much
I mean,
attention to gauge.
yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for years where we do specific projects with specific amounts of yarn, and knitters vary a lot in how they use yarn. It's a really wide margin of, you know, using a parsimonious amount versus like a really generous amount. So some people do consistently need to buy a little bit more yarn, and you know, in general, continental knitters usually use more yarn than throwers, and there's just only a few rules when it comes to that. But in my designing in a project like this, I try to really give a generous margin of, you know, for variation.
I knit combined. And that my row gauge almost never matches,
Mhm.
even when I get stitch gauge. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
used
that's
to,
just something, yeah, you know, and you compensate for it. And
and I'm only I'm under 5 feet tall, so a little smaller shawl will not be a problem.
well, that's good. Julie?
So kind of along those lines, we don't have any dimensions for each clue, like, you know, when you get to the end of color A on the first clue, you should have this many inches from your cast on row. We don't have anything like that to go by.
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's I did it when I was knitting it, I measured those measurements, but I didn't like really put them in the pattern because I was thinking, well, if you switched your yarns around, you might have a different length, you know.
True. Yeah. Okay.
Jean, do you have a question?
I do have a question. So I read this a million times, and so where am I going wrong? So it's the needles are 6s and 7s. I just automatically started with the 6 because usually that's how it goes. Was it a 6 or a 7 based on how you knit, or
No,
will
it's
7 come up?
no, it says to cast onto the smaller needle. Or the most recent version of the pattern says to cast onto the smaller needle.
Okay, so the first version didn't. I didn't read.
Yeah, it did. I corrected the first clue last week right away.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Are you
Okay,
using
that's fine.
are you using the combined pattern or the?
So no, I wasn't. I was just saying, well, I don't need it, so I didn't print it.
Oh,
But I
okay.
would.
So you can downloading separate clues or?
Yeah, so like I take the clue from the last week and I just do that. And then I
Okay,
get the
well,
clue
last
from-
week there was an update that came out on the
Okay.
first clue.
Oh, okay, that's what I missed.
Yeah,
Okay.
and on the square, it said that the small needle was for the cast on, but I forgot to put it in the triangle. So
Okay.
anyway, it is a smaller needle that is your starting needle.
Okay, perfect. Because that's what I'm on anyway, so.
And you caught me, the larger needle is added just as a tease.
You were just wondering if someone's gonna figure that out.
Who was gonna bring it up?
Yeah, exactly.
No, of course, that's gonna be late. Like I said, some of the stitch patterns end up with a different gauge. And so a larger needle is gonna compensate for that later. Okay. Cheryl,
Okay.
did you have a question? Or Linda? Okay. Anybody else have questions? I did not think we would fill up 2 hours talking about Wensleydale, but here we are. Another new to us wonderful breed, and hopefully one that we'll get to have more of. I mean, I want to say that the mill sent us a picture of like the fleeces when they came in, but I couldn't find it. I have to see if Barb has it. And if so, I think they have access to some Wensleydale every year. So that's really nice for us to know. What, Linda? You're muted, so we can't hear you.
I didn't say anything. I'm just
Oh,
listening, probably shaking my head around.
how did you
I
like
was just feeling the yarn again and thinking it really is nice.
Yeah, because I remember you responded to that Parendale last year, which I think has a kind of similar hand.
Yeah,
And
I
and
made the
made a
misters out of the Parendale.
yeah, made a whole garment out of it.
Yeah,
And this is nice and soft though.
yeah,
This is
this is lovely.
yeah. Well, all right, you guys, it's 10 after 8, just about. And I'm gonna go try to walk my dogs before it gets dark. And I will see you Saturday. I'll just
Thanks,
happen to be
Anne.
Saturday, Donna.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
That was great. Thanks.